Hold on to your tinfoil hats, conspiracy theorists, because the truth is about to be unveiled. Leaked documents, meticulously hidden from the public eye, have finally surfaced, exposing the government's clandestine alien agenda. Prepare to be astounded as we delve into the shocking revelations contained within these confidential files, shedding light on a covert operation that could forever change our understanding of humanity's place in the universe.
Spot we have rabbit telepathy. This is a document that originally comes to us from 1975, but it was declassified in 2004. Located on the CIA website as a Department of Defense document, it detailed a variety of, quote, Soviet and Czechoslovakian parapsychology research that was done from the end of World War II through to the Cold War era. One of the most grisly and truly unbelievable experiments that were conducted that was listed on this document occurred in 1956. Basically, they were trying to use rabbits to communicate with submarines, which is definitely just bizarre on a regular level, but of course the way in which they conducted this experiment was wrong and inhumane and truly just very cruel. Just a little heads up, if you're sensitive to animal stuff, I would maybe just go ahead and skip over this point. So for the test, they would take a mother rabbit who had recently just had bunnies. They would keep the mother in a lab on shore, and then they would take the bunnies down with them into the submarine. Slowly, one by one, they would take the life of the bunnies, and each time they did, the mother rabbit's brain would produce a detectable and recordable reactioning. Is this one of the worst things I've ever heard? Yes. What's even worse is that the report then goes on to say that other examples of, quote, animal telepathy research continued into the 1970s, and that it included other animals such as dogs, bears, birds, insects, and fish. I can't imagine they were any different, but let's just hope that these other tests weren't quite so cruel and inhumane. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Gateway Process. This document was originally published in 1983 and was declassified 20 years later, and it was prepared by Wayne M. McDonnell at the request of the commanding officer in the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command. Basically, McDonnell was tasked with assessing the Gateway Experience, which is a meditation training that was meant to instruct people on how to harness their electromagnetic energy waves, and it trained them how to direct their own brain waves and use them to detach from time and space. You can in fact still find and buy this program should you wish to. The analysis or assessment by Wayne tackles a wide variety of subjects, all the way from astral projection to quantum physics and so much more, but at the end you're pretty much left with the fact that, quote, there is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. But are you ready for the unsettling part? He also warns that those using the techniques for, quote, terrestrial information gathering trips or other operations of the like should be, quote, intellectually prepared to react to pulsable encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. That's enough for me to tap out without even trying it. In our number 8 spot today, we have the cattle crimes. Okay, so these documents reveal a super grim FBI investigation that took place in the 1970s at the request of US Senators Floyd Haskell of Colorado and Carl Curtis of Nebraska. I guess there was some weird sort of connection between these horrific things being done to cattle across as many as 21 states. In a letter from 1975, Senator Haskell was able to identify 130 of these strange, macabre cases in Colorado alone. All of the cases were eerily similar, which is unsettling considering the details. In most cases, the cattle would have had their left ear, left eye, rectum, and reproductive organs all missing, and all the blood was drained from the carcass, but there was no blood on the ground or around them, nor were there any footprints. How absolutely horrifying is that? Some people chose to believe that the cause for these was mysterious helicopters and UFOs, but there's a letter from Senator Curtis to the FBI director that says, quote, the series of incidents stretching from Oklahoma to Nebraska in which cattle have been dismembered in some kind of strange witchcraft cult. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think it was UFOs or witches that did it. It wasn't until 1979 that the FBI was granted jurisdiction to begin investigating these weird happenings, and when they did, they determined that most of the instances were a result of quote, normal predator and scavenger activity. And while that answer sounds a little fishy at best, the documents went forward to reveal that not all of the instances could be accounted for. Also, this idea of it being a completely normal scenario also contradicts reports that say the techniques used in these horrible instances were quote, very professional and sometimes even referred to as being conducted with surgical precision. I'm sorry, but a wolf or a coyote or a bear or whatever predator you want to say did this, ripping apart its meal isn't exactly a surgically precise operation. No arrests were ever made, and while it was deemed solved, a ton of mystery still surrounds these stories to this day. In our number 7 spot today, we have Acoustic Kitty. Apparently in 1967, the CIA was spending millions of dollars trying to make cats into spies. I don't know why they chose the one animal that does not care what you want it to do, but alas, they did, and Project Acoustic Kitty was born. The project basically involved implanting electronic spy equipment into real, living cats, who would then be trained to basically eavesdrop on unsuspecting people. This is another one of those Cold War era plans that was intended to be used on those in the Soviet Union. The project had a whole slew of issues, of course, however, because cats get hungry and distracted, and unfortunately the first time this plan was being tested, there was a catastrophic outcome. The cat got hit by a taxi, but the project of course was cancelled, and the researchers said that they believed they could train cats to move short distances, but that quote, the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation force us to conclude that for our intelligence purposes, it would not be practical. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Judgment Call. If you haven't heard of the name Stanislav Petrov before, maybe just take a second to whisper a quiet thank you to him, because he truly might have saved all of our lives with one moment of calm, cool decision making. In declassified records released in 1998, it became known that back in 1983, when Stanislav was a Soviet Union soldier, he opted not to fire nuclear missiles, despite the fact that it appeared that the United States had launched 5 missiles directly at his home country. He used his own personal judgment to assess and figured that it was a false alarm, and he was right. Having to make a call like that would be tough. The stakes are so high, but he honestly, in that one single moment, might have prevented a third and likely nuclear world war. I'm definitely glad that those documents became declassified so that the world could learn of this story. It kind of revives my faith in humanity just a little. Maybe not everyone just reacts without thinking. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Unthinkable. The title of this video says unspeakable, but the title of this operation says unthinkable, and honestly, both are kinda true. Declassified in 1998, the documents pertaining to this operation have to do with what could have been a completely different ending to the Second World War. The documents describe Russia as a quote, threat to Western civilization, and they also outline the possibility of a quote, total war against the USSR in the wake of World War II, and they state that the goal of the mission would be to, quote, impose upon Russia the will of the United States and British Empire. The document also revealed plans to utilize the newly defeated German military, as the document says that the Allied forces, quote, can count upon the use of German manpower and what remains of German industrial capacity. According to the documents, if followed through, this plan would lead to the elimination of Russia through either occupation of the metropolitan areas or in even darker turns, until the Allied forces made such a decisive defeat of the Russian forces in the field as to render it impossible for the USSR to continue. In the end, the operation was deemed too hazardous, and it was decided that in order to win, it would take quite a long time and it simply wasn't worth the risk, so the idea was scrapped. In our number 4 spot today, we have The Phone Call. Not so much of a document and rather a phone call, but when the telephone calls of former President Lyndon B. Johnson were revealed, it also showed something darker. The calls showed that then presidential candidate Richard Nixon might have negotiated behind the back of the president with South Vietnam. South Vietnam apparently ended up pulling out of the Paris peace talks after being told that Nixon would get them a better deal once elected. You might be wondering why he did this, and apparently that is because Nixon was was concerned that an earlier ending to the war would end up derailing his election campaign, since the war was one of the most pressing campaign issues. In the end, Nixon did end up winning the election by less than 1% of the popular vote. For many years this was speculated and rumors were swirling, but once the phone calls were released, it seemed to confirm what many believed for years. In our number 3 spot today, we have Starfish Prime. This is an operation that took place in 1962, with the documents discussing the outcomes being declassified in 1989, and the operation was a joint one between the US Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency. Basically, they detonated a thermonuclear device in the sky above the Pacific Ocean. They launched it from the Johnson Atoll using the Thor rocket, and once at an altitude of about 240 miles, they set it off, which ended up producing a yield of about 1.4 megatons. The documents showed that the electromagnetic pulse was so powerful and widespread that it disabled not only most of the equipment that was set up to measure it, but it also took out streetlights and caused telephone outages in Hawaii, nearly 900 miles away. The electrons released caused an aurora that could be seen over most of the Pacific Ocean, and according to the documents, the quote visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense, and apparently it was visible for days. In the end, it is said that the researchers weren't expecting such a powerful blast of electromagnetic pulse, and they also were not anticipating that the electrons from the blast would get stuck in the Earth's own magnetic field for months, possibly even years, but alas, they did. This went on to create a radiation belt around the planet that eventually went on to disable at least 6 satellites. So, that's great. In our number 2 spot today, we have The Warning. On Tuesday, January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger launched on live TV, but just 73 seconds into its flight, it disastrously disintegrated, taking the lives of all 7 people on board, which included high school teacher Krista McAuliffe, who was going to be the first non-military civilian in space due to the Teacher in Space program. Of course, investigations were immediately launched to figure out how this could have happened and what exactly went wrong. In fact, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, appointed a special commission to investigate the causes, and as it turned out, the investigation report revealed that the disaster was, quote, an accident rooted in history. This basically confirmed that NASA had previously known about the problems that led to the destruction of the Challenger and the subsequent demise of the crew. The least surprised of all was perhaps engineer Robert Boisjoli, who apparently sent an inter-office memo months prior to the tragedy warning of the exact fate the Challenger would meet should they continue to choose to launch the shuttle in such cold weather. Quote, the result would be catastrophic of the highest order, he wrote. Quote, loss of human life. In our number 1 spot today, we have Operation LAC. Operation LAC, which is short for Large Area Coverage, was a Cold War era project that involved the US Army Chemical Corps. Basically, it was a test that was designed to see whether or not it could be possible or feasible to taint a large area by dropping chemical agents from planes. To test this idea, they dropped, quote, a myriad of microscopic particles from planes, covering an area that is said to span from the Rockies to the Atlantic, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, so yeah, definitely a large area. In fact, it was so large that this is actually the largest test that the Chemical Corps had ever undertaken. According to the declassified documents relating to this operation, the test, quote, did not provide the Corps with nearly as much data as the Corps would like, and then it goes on to say that, quote, to obtain additional data, the Corps planned further tests for the next fiscal year. Okay, that's a little daunting. While not necessarily the same operation, also in the Cold War era was a similar test conducted that targeted a neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. This test saw the area being sprayed with zinc cadmium sulfide. At the time, those local to the area were being told that, quote, the government was testing a smoke screen that could shield St. Louis from the aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. But of course, decades later, documents revealed that the tests were actually a part of a biological weapons program. And to make matters even worse, the zinc cadmium sulfide was linked to an increase in cancer among the residents of the neighborhood.
Number 10. UAP report. Alien fans and skeptics alike were pretty shocked when just a few months ago the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, said that they believed in aliens. Well, actually, they said they were going to be investigating unidentified flying objects, but close enough. While some people did believe that this was NASA saying, hey, we believe in aliens, it was actually them announcing they were going to launch a study into UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, because I guess they're just too good to say UFO. The scientist coordinating the study said, "Over the decades, NASA has answered the call to tackle some of the most perplexing mysteries we know of, and this is no different." In the report, they said that a good chunk of confirmed unidentified objects seemed to show evidence that they were made using advanced technology that humans just don't have yet. Number 9. Injuries. A Freedom of Information Act request caused 1,500 pages of UFO reports and evidence to be declassified and leaked to the public. And what the pages contained was pretty shocking for those who read it. A percentage of the pages included information of how people who reported seeing UFOs and aliens had been legitimately physically affected, real physical evidence that something unexplained had happened to them. Some of the reports included things like burns, which could have been caused by the jets of a UFO, or potential face-to-face alien interference. Bafflingly, they also confirmed that women who had come into contact with aliens shortly fell mysteriously pregnant after the event, with no explanation as to why they were suddenly with child. Yes, we all know by now how mommy and daddy make babies, but that apparently wasn't a factor in these cases. Alien babies potentially on the way. Number 8. FLIR. Alongside these 1,500 documents, 3 separate videos were released that appeared to show UFOs being spotted by the United States military, so let's take a look. The first is titled FLIR and was originally filmed back in 2004 when the USS Nimitz was flying off the coast of Southern California. There had apparently already been an unidentified aircraft in the area for up to a week before the video was filmed. Off the coast, they spotted a large oval-shaped object, estimating it to be about 40 feet long and white in color. 4 people on the craft saw the object for a running total of about 5 minutes, although the video is only just over a minute. They were able to track it using their advanced infrared camera, and due to the object's shape, they nicknamed it the Tic Tac. All these videos to this day have no real explanation for what the UFOs actually were. Number 7. Gimbal. Next up on the list, we have the video titled Gimbal, which was leaked alongside the last one I just talked about. This one's different because we can hear the people in the jet reacting to what they're seeing. They use a similar infrared camera and follow the object that was flying over the East Coast. At first, they comment that it might be some kind of drone, but then note that it is fighting against incredibly strong winds and appearing to not be affected by it at all. They even comment that there are other unidentified crafts in the area, but we don't actually see them as it's locked onto the target. What's interesting about this one, as the people in the video point out, is that it moves in an incredibly strange fashion, appearing to rotate and move around despite the heavy winds it's apparently fighting against. My favorite part of this is that there's one guy calmly stating facts about it while the other cusses and yells in excitement. Is that a f***ing drone, dude? Number 6. Go fast. The third and final leaked video is probably the best of the bunch, as the video starts before they have managed to lock onto the target and you can see it moving. The video is pretty correctly titled Go Fast because this thing is moving incredibly fast, like definitely faster than anything else that could have been an easy explanation. It's zipping over the top of the water as they try to get their camera to lock onto it, and when they finally do, they start cheering because of just how difficult it was due to how fast the object was moving. Their comments are a mix of excitement and confusion in regards to what they've managed to find, saying, "Look at that thing fly," while also going, "What the f*** is that thing?" People often like to write off UFOs as some sort of secret military practice vessels or training project, so what can it be when the military itself doesn't know what they saw? Number 5. Pentagon Report. In May of this year, the Pentagon appeared on a panel where they discussed UFOs, and they revealed just how much information they have about the situation. They said that there are around 400 separate reports of unidentified flying objects coming from military personnel. So while we do have the 3 leaked videos, there are likely even more locked up in a safe somewhere that offer convincing evidence of the existence of aliens. The Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence said, "We've seen an increasing number of unauthorized and/or unidentified aircraft or objects, and military control training areas and training ranges and other designated airspace. Reports of sightings are frequent and continuous. While it definitely sounds like he's trying to sweep it under the rug as someone just like flying a drone illegally onto a military base or something, I think it's safe to say the military have the resources to know if it were something as simple as that. So their confusion and uncertainty makes it seem more and more like aliens are among us. Number 4. Live stream. In 2016, an incident occurred during NASA's live feed from a camera mounted on the International Space Station that pointed towards the Earth. You can see the Earth's curve, and one viewer noticed that for a short moment, a massive bright object can be seen falling towards the planet. But as quickly as it comes, it's gone as the live feed conveniently cuts out and experiences technical difficulties. The video was posted to YouTube, and people immediately started theorizing that NASA had intentionally cut the live feed at this moment to cover up the fact that this bright shape was a UFO, or at least something alien in origin. Many people noted how suspicious this was and started calling out NASA for their actions, while other people were saying that it was just a meteor or some hunk of space junk. A spokesperson for NASA said that the cameras are controlled automatically, and it had simply passed out of range, causing the video to be cut off. But that's just what they want you to think. Number 3. Alien junk. An astrophysicist from Harvard wrote a book that was titled Extraterrestrial: The First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, and it was about how he believed that an object that passed through the solar system in 2017 was actually a piece of alien technology, bringing forward the theory that NASA is actually just ignoring real evidence of alien existence because they're just brushing it off as some random space junk. Whether they believe it really is space junk or they're just trying to make us think that that's what it is. The object was long and not shaped like any known comet we've ever seen before. It also apparently accelerated away from the sun, and he believes it ended up in our solar system accidentally thanks to aliens, saying, "A buoy, a grid of pods for communication, other intelligent living organisms, defunct technology, or discarded technological trash. These are all plausible explanations." Number 2. Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin was one of a handful of astronauts who were aboard the Apollo 11, the first spaceflight that put humans on the moon with one small step for man. During their journey, however, they saw more than just the moon. Apparently, they may have seen a UFO. They reported seeing large objects that appeared to follow alongside them. It was confirmed not to be the upper stage of the rocket that would have been detached, as this was 6,000 miles away from them at the time. The event was kept under wraps, and nobody talked about it until it was brought up years later, sweeping it under the rug as simply a panel that had disconnected from the ship. But again, that's just what they want you to think. The claims coming from a senior NASA scientist who said he had just called up Buzz on the phone and he had agreed. Did you really talk to him on the phone, senior NASA scientist? Did you really? Number 1. ISS report. Alright, this one's not actually NASA because it actually comes from a Russian astronaut aboard the International Space Station, and I'm just gonna count it because it's a pretty cool video. He was on board the ISS using his camera to record the southern lights, which are the same as the northern lights but in the south. It's a time-lapse recording, and for a brief moment you can see a line of large bright lights moving across the sky. In the tweet the astronaut posted, he referred to them as space guests, saying that while it was only a few seconds in the time-lapse, it was actually around 52 seconds in real time. Some people suggest that it may have been some kind of meteor or satellite, but I'm actually a licensed professional and I say that it was aliens.
The JFK assassination is often described as the mother of all conspiracies, and yes, with just a little digging, you'll find that MJ-12 is mentioned here too. Some people believe that Kennedy found out about MJ-12 and the secret dealings they had with aliens. Supposedly, he wanted to reveal the truth to the American public, thinking they had a right to know. This of course didn't sit well with MJ-12, who were determined to keep everything under wraps. On top of that, or maybe alternatively, depending on who you talk to, Kennedy was sticking his nose where MJ-12 didn't want him to, trying to have the US and the Soviets work together, but this would mean sharing sensitive information with them about UFOs, and MJ-12 didn't want that. One piece of evidence that fueled this theory is a document called the Burned Memo. This document surfaced in the 90s, and it's said to be a memo from an MJ-12 member ordering someone to essentially terminate Kennedy, using coded language, of course. The memo mentions Lancer, which was Kennedy's Secret Service code name. Now, another part of the theory involves a speech Kennedy gave at the United Nations in 1963, where he talked about the need for cooperation between the US and the Soviet Union, even suggesting they should work together in space exploration. So some believe this was a veiled reference that he was making for his desire to share UFO secrets with the world. There's also a memo that Kennedy sent to the CIA asking for a review of UFO files. He wanted to be debriefed on the unknowns, as he referred to them as in the memo. And what's very eerie is that this memo was dated just 10 days before he was killed. So, did MJ-12 see him as a threat to their secrecy and decided they needed to dispose of him? Now, how exactly did MJ-12 get started? Well, for that, we gotta go all the way back to the Roswell incident. Just how many dots are we gonna be connecting in this video? I told you, these guys are everywhere. So in July of 1947, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. The military first reported it as a flying disc, and this news spread like wildfire. But soon after, the story was changed. They claimed it was now just a weather balloon. So why this quick switch up? Was it really just a weather balloon, or was something else going on? Well, according to some, there was 100% something else going on. There are a lot of people who think the government was hiding something big. They suspected that the military had actually recovered an alien spacecraft and possibly even alien bodies from that crash site. This theory got stronger over the years as more people, including supposed whistleblowers, came forward with their own stories. MJ-12 is said to have spawned out of this Roswell incident, a secret group created by President Harry Truman. Story goes that the group was formed to manage and cover up all information about UFOs and extraterrestrials, particularly what was found at Roswell, and apparently they've been operating in the shadows ever since. But when did the rumors about MJ-12 begin? I mean, if they're so top secret, how did word about them start spreading in the first place? Well, the origins of the Majestic 12 conspiracy go back to the 80s. So in 1984, a UFO researcher named Jamie Shendere got an envelope in the mail with some film inside. When he developed the film, it apparently showed 8 pages of documents that looked like they were briefing papers for something called Operation Majestic 12. These papers described a secret group of 12 people, the names of scientists, military leaders, and government officials. More on them later. Then on May 31st, 1987, a British UFO researcher named Timothy Good claimed that he had documents from the 50s that revealed a secret committee called Majestic 12. And these documents apparently detailed everything I just outlined. This group was formed in 1947 by an order from President Harry S. Truman. The documents said the committee's job was to cover up the crash of the alien spacecraft at Roswell in July of 47. So figure out how to use the alien technology they found and decide how the US should deal with extraterrestrial life in the future. Who are some of the big names that were said to be in Majestic 12 though? Vannevar Bush was a key figure during World War II. He was a brilliant engineer and inventor, probably most famous for his work on the infamous Manhattan Project. He also helped create the National Science Foundation and was an advisor to President Roosevelt and President Truman. His name shows up in the MJ-12 documents and was allegedly part of the organization. If MJ-12 is real, Bush's inclusion would make sense. I mean, he worked on the Manhattan Project. If he was helping to build a nuclear bomb, why wouldn't he be involved in top secret UFO research? James Forrestal was the first US Secretary of Defense, appointed in 1947. Before that, he was a Secretary of the Navy. He was heavily involved in the early Cold War period, and he had access to some of the most classified information. He would have been a logical choice for a group like MJ-12. On top of that, there's always been some mystery as to the exact circumstances of his death in 1949, which some think may have had something to do with his involvement in MJ-12. Roscoe H. Hillenkotter was the first director of the CIA, serving from 1947 to 1950. He later joined the board of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which is a civilian UFO research group. makes sense why he'd be here. These are just a few of the names, of course. And now that we've dove into what this organization is, the history of it, who could have been involved, let's get into some of the criticism. We can't talk about Majestic 12 without mentioning the highly controversial Cutler-Twining memo. So I mentioned Jamie Chenderay before, who'd received an envelope with photos of documents detailing MJ-12. Well, just a year later in 1985, he and two other well-known UFOologists, Shanton T. Friedman and Bill Moore, had been on the hunt for declassified files in the National Archives when they apparently received a series of anonymous messages leading them to a very interesting document. The memo is a one-page document dated July 14, 1954. It was allegedly written by Robert Cutler, who was President Eisenhower's national security advisor, and addressed to General Nathan Twining. Twining was a high-ranking Air Force officer, which makes this memo a pretty big deal if it's real. The document briefly mentions MJ-12 and talks about a meeting which some people think was related to UFOs and alien technology. People who believe in MJ-12 and UFO cover-ups saw this as a major piece of proof that MJ-12 was real and involved in hiding information about UFOs. Here's where it gets controversial though. There are several problems with this memo. First, there's no official record of a meeting on the date mentioned in the memo. Second, the style and format of the memo don't match the official documents from that time. Even the typeface used is apparently off. Another big issue is that Robert Cutler was actually out of the country on the date the memo was supposedly written. A lot of these arguments were brought forward by a UFO researcher and skeptic named Philip J. Klass and the FBI. But Klass was often labeled as a disinformation agent by conspiracy theorists. And again, even the FBI chimed in though. The FBI dug into the Cutler-Twining memo and other supposed MJ-12 documents. They began their investigation in 1988 after receiving copies of these supposed documents. There were apparently discrepancies in the language and terminology that would have been used in a document like this. Another big issue was the content of the documents themselves. The FBI stated that the information seemed out of place. It seemed to be suspiciously tailored to fit the UFO conspiracy theories that were very popular in the 80s, rather than reflecting what would have been talked about at the time the documents were supposedly formed. It just seemed like someone had written them with modern UFO enthusiasts in mind, rather than being a genuine historical document. So in the end, the FBI declared the MJ-12 documents to be falsified and wrote bogus on them with big, bold letters. But did this really sway anyone who was highly skeptical of the government in the first place? Yeah, not really. And I mean, fair enough. It would make sense for an intelligence and security service organization like the FBI to cover up or downplay something like this. So, does MJ-12 still exist? Did they ever exist at all? Well, they may or may not, but if the whole thing is fake, then how and why was this conspiracy concocted? Well, the first thought is that it's just UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists looking too deeply into things and spotting things that aren't really there, but there's another possibility. I mentioned the UFO researcher Bill Moore earlier, who was one of the big names involved in the unearthing of these supposed MJ-12 documents. Well, he actually started changing his tune about this whole thing. Moore thought that the government was covering something up. It just may have not been aliens, unfortunately. Instead, he thinks the whole thing was drummed up by the United States government as part of a mass disinformation campaign. The purpose? To distract the public from top secret Air Force projects that were really going on. It makes sense. People would get so excited by the idea that the government was interacting with extraterrestrials that they'd be totally blind to the actual nefarious stuff the government was working on. But there's another aspect to this theory as well. What if the disinformation campaign was formed by the government in order to lessen people's interest in aliens and UFOs? What do I mean by this? Well, think about it. The government creates the documents, lets the public obsess over them, then discredits them to make the whole topic of UFOs look silly. Purpose of this? UFOs and aliens really are existing and they just don't want the public to be focusing on it. Hey, Who knows?
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Paperclip. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Nazi Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, this had to be done and was done. Several of the scientists that were a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who really played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions. In our number 9 spot today, we have the investigation. In 1967, while in the midst of the Six-Day War, which was between Israel and neighboring states, an Israeli aircraft attacked the USS Liberty, which was a ship that was gathering information for the US NSA. In this attack, 34 Americans were killed and 171 were injured. Many people, of course, were outraged and figured that this attack was intentional. Many people believed that the Israeli government meant to follow through with this attack so that they could prevent the, quote, spy ship from intercepting sensitive information about upcoming battles. In the end, declassified documents from both the US and Israeli government agencies showed a very different story. It turns out that the attack was in fact not deliberate, and that pilots had thought that the USS Liberty was an enemy ship, which was why the attack was launched. The declassified reports show the actual position they had when the incident went down. And our number 8 spot today, we have Project Horizon. Even before people were going to space, we had big goals in mind for the world of space travel. In 1959, there were plans for a proposed manned military base that would be located, of course, on the moon. This plan, which was dubbed Project Horizon, would, quote, develop and protect potential United States interest on the moon, as said in now declassified documents. It was estimated at the time to cost about $6 billion, and the projected operational date was December of 1966, which is when they thought they could have 12 soldiers on the base by. The project was not only wanted to study more about the surface of the moon, but what better of a place to spy on the Earth than the moon? This project, of course, never came to fruition, and the reason it stopped progressing was because the president at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, rejected it at the same time that the responsibility for America's space program was being transferred over to NASA. In our number 7 spot today, we have consideration. Presidential duties certainly are not easy, and making big important decisions is likely a very nerve-wracking experience that you would probably want as much information as possible for. That is exactly why, around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Maxwell Taylor wrote a memo at the request of the then President John F. Kennedy. The memo was requested because Kennedy wanted to know what the human cost would be of invading Cuba. The declassified memo explained that should the Cuban forces use conventional weapons and not tactical nukes, that, quote, our medical plans are drawn up to accommodate up to 18,500 casualties in the first 10 days of the operation. He then goes on to explain that if these tactical nuclear weapons were in fact used, that, quote, there is no experience factor upon which to base an estimate of casualties. The number they could estimate is already more than terrible enough. I truly do not even want to hear the next one. In our number 6 spot today, we have Project Minaret. This is a document that became declassified in 2013 as a part of the National Security Archives efforts. This historical document describes a sort of watch list of prominent Americans who were critical of the Vietnam War. The document explains that their overseas communications were tapped and listened into by the government from 1967 to 1973, and a quote from the document reads, quote, President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad. The project expanded so much that it went on to include more than 1,600 people, including civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Whitney Young, and Muhammad Ali. There were also other people like Democratic U.S. Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, New York Times columnist Tom Wicker, and Washington Post humor columnist Art Buchwald. The surveillance began under President Johnson, but it continued on through to the Nixon administration. In the end, the only reason it was stopped was because Attorney General Elliot Richardson was concerned about its very doubtful and murky legality and decided during the Watergate scandal that it would be best to shut it down. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Gladio. This is a plan that was developed during the Cold War by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Basically, the plan was designed to keep Europe as safe as possible if there were to be a Soviet invasion, and to do so, the plan was to form these kinds of secret armies in many NATO countries like Italy, Belgium, and France. These armies would be preparing for a potential takeover, and they would then lead the resistance if this were to occur. Some of the preparations for this plan, should it have to go forward, were things like spying as well as hoarding ammunition, which is a frightening thought. This project was so secret that not only was the Soviet Union obviously kept out of the loop, but some of the highest ranking officials in the countries involved didn't even know about these little secret armies. In our number 4 spot today, we have a double agent. Oleg Penkovsky was a Soviet military intelligence officer who had a high rank, but he was actually working for the United States and Great Britain during the Cold War. Sort of like a double agent sort of thing. He is best known for the role he played during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, where he gave the US government some information that turned out to be extremely valuable that pertained to the capabilities of the Soviet missiles that had been installed in Cuba. In the end, Oleg was found out by the other Soviet intelligence officers, charged with treason, and executed in 1963, which is a terrible ending to that story. But what if I told you that some declassified documents just might have revealed a different side of this story? There are apparently some people who believe, because of these documents, that Oleg was just a decoy who may have actually relayed false information to the US about the Soviet arms capabilities. The intelligence he gave them just may be proof that his loyalty was with the Soviet Union the entire time. In our number 3 spot today, we have the aircraft. In 1988, a US warship in the Persian Gulf ended up shooting down an aircraft. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a civilian craft that was on its way to Dubai, and in the end, there were no survivors. According to declassified documents, Navy personnel incorrectly identified the plane as an Iranian fighter jet before launching the missile that took the flight down. In 1996, the United States reached a settlement with Iran where they paid $61.8 million to compensate the families of the victims, but it is said that there has never been an apology issued. In now declassified official investigation documents, it is said that they could not find any fault with the naval officers who brought down the flight. Others have suggested that this is untrue, as journalists pointed to discrepancies between the official report and the later accounts of what occurred. Like, allegedly it was originally said that the flight deviated from its standard route, but this is said to have been found to be false. The report also apparently says that the warship was operating in international waters at the time, when it was really operating in Iranian territorial waters. In our number 2 spot today, we have the lie. Thanks to a document from the National Security Agency that was declassified, many people received a confirmation of what they long believed. This is the idea that one of the 2 supposed North Vietnamese attacks on US ships in the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964, the attack that the president at the time, Lyndon Johnson, and his administration used to justify the massive escalation of the Vietnam War, yeah, apparently it didn't happen at all. The historical analysis conducted and declassified by the NSA revealed this all. In the article, it is noted that intelligence and defense officials who knew about the faked attack, or rather who doubted the evidence brought forward by the administration, didn't speak up because of a, quote, awareness that President Johnson would brook no uncertainty that could undermine his position. It's a terrifying reality, especially when we look at the war and what went on to happen from there. In our number 1 spot today, we have New Techniques. This is a project that was originally released in 2004, but it was heavily redacted by the Bush administration and then was released again with a little less deletions by the Obama administration, and basically it describes what is called, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques that were used on certain detainees that were part of a terror group. These techniques include things like something called walling, which includes pulling the prisoners forward and then pushing them back into the wall, stress positions, sleep deprivation, waterboarding, and sometimes even isolation and sensory deprivation for hours on end, sometimes with a, quote, harmless insect placed inside of the box with them, which is intended to increase the discomfort. All in all, there's still a lot in these documents that hasn't been fully revealed to the public, but I think we've all seen enough movies to understand.
So starting us off at number 10, cover-ups. So this might not be news in regards to the idea of alien life and the government's involvement, as it's long been theorized by believers that the government has been covering up truths in relation to ETs and UFOs. But if we are to believe what was said in Congress, then that means the theory wasn't wrong. A former intelligence official testified last Wednesday that the United States government has found and covered up evidence of extraterrestrial life for decades. One of the witnesses, retired Major David Grush, alleged at a House of Representatives hearing about UFOs that the Pentagon has recovered crashed vehicles and biological remains believed to be of non-human origin. Quote, "I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. My testimony is based on information I have been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony." So yeah, and it only gets crazier from here. Moving on to number 9, caught on video. Now, as I mentioned, there were 3 military veterans that were a part of this hearing. We touched on David Grush in the last point, but the other 2 witnesses, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, and retired Navy Commander David Fravor, both testified they too had personal experiences with UFOs while on the job. One of the more shocking incidents in particular detailed by Fravor was an incident from 2004, where a UAP was caught on video. Now, UFOs, or UAPs as they're formally referred to by military personnel, are defined as any object that is detected but cannot be immediately explained. And while some end up having innocent explanations like being weather balloons or drones, others remain quite the mystery. The 2004 incident falls into the latter category. Fravor said it was several years before any officials followed up on the extraordinary events of the day, and even then, he added that nothing was done. Moving on to number 8. There's a support group. Obviously, there was a lot of juicy information being revealed at the hearing, and I don't know if this was news to everyone, but it was to me, so I'm adding it. The former Navy pilot Ryan Graves talked about how he had founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace group that supports aviators who have reported UAPs, which might not sound like the craziest thing compared to what else was revealed. I mean, there are support groups for tons of different things, but to think that people are likely to require support after coming forward with unexplainable sightings is kind of crazy. Like, what is happening after they submit this report? What did they see? What did their superiors do to them? Graves stated that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are, quote, performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. Further adding, quote, if everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. Moving on to number 7, fear of coming forward. So branching off of my last point, during the hearing, much of the discussion centered on improving the process for reporting unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, but Grush was also there to promote removing the stigma for aviators who report UAP sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. The former intelligence officer told the panel that he and several other colleagues have been the targets of what he calls administrative terrorism, and that he has at times feared for his life since coming forward. Which, I mean, would make a lot of sense if that's true, why a support group was put in place for those who report UAPs. Quote, it was very brutal and very unfortunate. Some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, he said, adding that there is currently an open investigation into the matter. Moving on to number 6. safety issues. One of the major arguments this hearing was intending to focus on was that in not reporting or in discouraging reports, we are creating a national safety issue. And there is a push for intelligence agencies to be more transparent about UAPs in order to promote national safety. Supporters of this, like Democratic Rep. Robert Garcia of California, said, quote, UAPs, whatever they may be, may pose a serious threat to our military and our civilian aircraft, and that must be understood. We should encourage more reporting, not less, on UAPs. The more we understand, the safer we will be. Grush, Graves, and Fravor all echoed similar sentiments, explaining they would like to see a, quote, safe and transparent reporting system. The men added that they are hopeful the public discourse is the first step towards eliminating the stigma and reports of UAPs to encourage others to come forward. Moving on to number 5. People have been hurt. So according to Grush, not only have there been some pretty sneaky cover-ups as well as some shady treatment to those who come forward, but people have also been harmed and threatened in order to not reveal information. Grush details that as a former intelligence officer, he would go to jail for revealing classified information, but when he was asked whether anyone had been harmed or injured to cover up information about extraterrestrial technology, he answered yes. Now, that alone is scary enough, but even more wild is that when he was asked if anyone had been killed, he said he had, quote, directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities. Now, I get it. He can't say yes or no because it's classified and all, but that's kind of a creepy answer. Feels like he's trying to tell us yes without telling us that. Now, on the other hand, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, Sue Gao, told NBC News that Grush's claims are false, but I mean, I don't know, man. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 4. Sightings are not rare. According to former Navy pilot and executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, it wasn't just the 2004 incident that raised some eyebrows. Graves also talked about an incident with a flying object off the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. He said that while flying an F-18, he came across an aircraft that looked like a, quote, dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere. Which sounds pretty UFO-y if you ask me. Graves estimated the aircraft to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter and unlike any aircraft he has ever seen. But even more peculiar than its shape was that Graves claimed the UAP could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. And according to Graves, sightings like this one are not rare, are not isolated. Plus, he explained that his squadron submitted a safety report at the time, but that he received no official acknowledgement of the incident. Moving on to number 3. A very small amount get reported. Now, despite the fact that Graves claims sightings are not rare, and the fact that it feels like there is always a new UFO sighting popping up, officially speaking, there are apparently not very many sightings that actually get officially reported. Graves estimates that roughly 5% of UAP sightings are reported. Again, mostly due to stigma. Quote, I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issues this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are a concern for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. So hopefully this whole situation means more sightings will be reported following the hearing. I guess we will have to wait and see. Moving on to number 2, they really are more advanced. Back to retired Navy Commander David Fravor. I touched a bit in a previous point about his 2004 video he captured, but we're actually gonna circle back because there is a little more. Not only was this small tic-tac shaped flying object flabbergasting because they didn't know what it was, but according to Fravor, quote, there were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any visible flight control surfaces like wings. Plus, Fravor explained that as he and the other pilots tried to get closer to the mysterious craft, quote, "It rapidly accelerated and disappeared right in front of our aircraft, leaving behind no detectable turbulence," which essentially means whatever it was and whoever created it has far more access to superior technology than we do here on Earth. Fravor said, quote, "I'm not a UFO fanatic, but what we saw with our 4 sets of eyes, we have nothing close to it. It was incredible technology." Similarly, Grush alleged at another time that the military had misused funds allocated for other programs to try to reverse engineer some of the supposedly non-human technology. And last up in our number 1 spot, there are still unanswered questions. While there was certainly some juicy deets revealed at the hearing, we were also left with even more questions and still a few skeptics. Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri said he found it far-fetched that an extraterrestrial species was technologically advanced enough to travel to Earth, yet is, quote, "somehow incompetent enough to survive Earth and crash." NASA also weighed in, saying that scientists have been searching for signs of life in our universe for years, but they have so far come up short. The space agency's missions have studied water on Mars, explored the ocean worlds, Titan and Europa, and looked for molecules that could be a sign of life in the atmospheres of alien planets, but claim that our understanding of life is still a bit fuzzy and ever-changing. Now, all of that being said, as per the Planetary Society, it is, quote, "very unlikely that Earth is the only home to intelligent life." So, we may be onto something here. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until more information is revealed.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Midnight Climax. This experiment took place in the 1950s, and it was one of those mind control research projects that was sponsored by the CIA. This was actually just one experiment that was a part of Project MKUltra. So basically, they wanted to study the effects of LSD, but instead of finding willing participants, which, let's be honest, probably wouldn't have been that difficult, instead they used non-consenting people who were lured to safe houses by sex workers who were being paid by the CIA, and then once at these safe houses they were slipped the drug and monitored from behind a one-way glass. For over a decade, the project gave the government more knowledge about the drug itself and what it does to the mind. It gave the knowledge about surveillance technology and even sexual blackmail. In the end, the project was shut down in 1965, but people don't forget, and the damage was already done. In our number 9 spot today, we have Operation Washtub. This operation came to light in 2014 when documents became declassified and more people could learn about this Cold War era operation. Basically, this was a covert mission that had its sights set on Alaska. The plan detailed the training of different people who lived in Alaska. Like, we're talking just ordinary residents. They wanted to train these people to both code and decode, and a few other different spying tactics, which would have been so cool. I mean, I would have wanted to be picked so badly. Not that I would have even known it was happening, but you get what I mean. Basically, the plan was put in place in case the Soviet Union was to invade Alaska. Then these unsuspecting ordinary citizens would use their newly learned espionage techniques to get all the intel they could and secretly relay that information to high-ranking US officials. As we now know, of course, this invasion never occurred, so the contingency plan wasn't needed, but there were 89 lucky temporary agents who were trained just for this purpose, and I have never been more jealous in my entire life. In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Minaret. This is a document that became declassified in 2013 as a part of the National Security Archive's efforts. This historical document describes a sort of watch list of prominent Americans who were critical of the Vietnam War. The document explains that their overseas communications were tapped and listened into by the government from 1967 to 1973, and a quote from the document reads, quote, "President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad." The project expanded so much that it went on to include more than 1,600 people, including civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Whitney Young, and Muhammad Ali. There were also people like Democratic US Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, a New York Times columnist, and a Washington Post columnist. The surveillance began under President Johnson, but it continued on through to the Nixon administration. In the end, the only reason it was stopped was because Attorney General Elliot Richardson was concerned about its very doubtful and murky legality and decided that during the Watergate scandal that it probably would just be best to shut it down. I mean, they definitely had enough on their plate already at the time. In our number 7 spot today we have Project Iceworm. This secret mission took place in the 1960s and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included places to stay, kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 6 spot today we have the Pentagon crash. We have all heard about the devastating September 11th, 2001 attacks, but some of you might not know that on the day there were actually 4 separate coordinated attacks, all a part of the same plan, and one of those attacks was on the Pentagon. There was a photo that was previously classified but eventually has been released by the US government, and it shows the absolute devastation that was done by the commercial plane that crashed into the Pentagon. The plane was able to tear through all 5 rings that existed in the building. All of the people on board the plane that day, as well as 125 people that were in the building at the time, passed away in this horrible event. For obvious reasons, the initial photos of the Pentagon damage were withheld from the public or from circulating in the media, but now that they have been released, it just shows us all another side to that horrible, terrifying day. In our number 5 spot today we have the UFO report. This photo is of a previously classified document from 1963. Although the document still has a lot of information that has been blacked out, the document is the description and report of an unidentified flying object or UFO encounter. This is said to have taken place over the desert of Nevada, and the report was written in detail in order to have a written record of the event. This document is said to be the authentic report from the FBI, which is exactly why some of the details have still been omitted, despite it being declassified. This might seem like less of a big deal now, as in this day and age we have declassified video footage of similar kinds of encounters, but for 1963 this was huge. As discussions of alien or extraterrestrial life is a big part of our modern society, this document shows that these things have been on our minds for many years now. In our number 4 spot today we have Project 1794. This project was created with the goal to build a sort of saucer-type aircraft that would be designed to shoot down Soviet bombers. The program, which was created in the 1950s, was quite ambitious and had some pretty lofty goals. A team of engineers began trying to build a disc-shaped aircraft, but here's the real kicker. They wanted it to be capable of traveling at supersonic speeds at high altitudes. The documents about this project show that they wanted it to be able to travel at Mach 4, which is 4 times the speed of sound, and they wanted it to be able to reach an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the time, the project was estimated to cost about $3 million, which is about $26 million today. In the end, the project was cancelled in 1961 because the craft failed tests and proved to be aerodynamically unstable, which of course would provide a whole slew of problems at high speeds, especially supersonic ones. In our number 3 spot today we have the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. So for this one, this is a mission that was created in response to a Soviet Union secret mission called Almaz. Basically, this program, called the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, was run by the Air Force and the intelligence community's National Reconnaissance Office, and the goal of it was to spy on and throw the Soviet Union off track in space. Some of the documents in this mission have now been declassified, and according to them, one of the goals was to knock some of Moscow's satellites out of orbit or to fire projectiles at them. They even wanted to try and capture one of the Soviet satellites in space and then basically send it back down to Earth so that they could study it. That's so wild. And because of this, Moscow equipped their secret space station with a rapid-fire cannon in order to stop any of this from happening. I seriously feel like I'm watching some sort of space action movie right now. I can't believe that these are real things that happened and they were created in the 60s and 70s. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lunik kidnapping. Don't worry, Lunik is not a person and instead is a Soviet lunar satellite that was kidnapped just for one night. This project honestly sounds like it was taken straight from a movie, and it has to do with the Great Space Race. In the early 1960s, the Soviet Union wanted to make it as clear as possible that they were winning the race to space, so they launched a multinational exhibition of their Lunik satellites, which became the first spacecraft to impact the moon's surface. And when the Luna 3 returned, it brought with it the first ever pictures of the moon's far side. It was a big deal, and it's safe to say that the US wanted to know everything that they could about it. Of course, the satellite was heavily guarded, but it was traveling from city to city for this exhibition, so undercover CIA agents went to work. Basically, they convinced the man who drove the transport truck to get some rest at a nearby hotel, and basically they would look after it for him while he rested. I'm sure it was a bit more complicated than this, but you get the gist. From here, the agents then took apart and photographed every single component of the thing before putting it back together and placing it back in the truck for its next tour date. There is no indication that before the operation became declassified that anyone outside of those involved knew what had happened that day, and I'm not gonna lie, this is a pretty hilarious plan, and the fact that it worked is both shocking and pretty impressive. In our number 1 spot today, we have Operation Paperclip. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Nazi Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have of course been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, this had to be done and was done. Several of the scientists a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about real-life crashed UFOs that the government has been hiding for decades. Click the video now to find out more.